Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to start off by giving all praises to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai Bashem Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and bishops and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. And also honor salutation to those of you who are of the hopeful elect and are out there teaching the word of sincerity and truth. Alright, so I wanted to get into Acts the second chapter here. Something I was thinking about earlier. And I said, you know what, it'd be a good topic to go into just to cover Acts the second chapter. I'm not going to go through the whole chapter, at least up until verse 13. And maybe we'll get into the second part of the chapter another time. But I wanted to get into these first 13 verses in particular. We went into this topic this past week at camp. There was a young lady that came up and had a few questions about what we were doing, and we got into the scriptures. And as always, when the topic of who the Lord came to give salvation to comes up, Christians always take the position of he came for everybody. But as we know in the scriptures, and our position is that the Lord only came for Israel. And the reason why this let's say verbiage of Gentiles or heathens come into play, or uncircumcision come into play, is because these are Israelites that were scattered in other lands. And Acts the second chapter is as good as any, and breaking that down to explain how that can be. Matter of fact, let me go here first. You open up another one of these. This is, what was I thinking just now? Yeah, James 1. This is James 1:1, one of our go-tos when it comes to this topic. James, a servant of the Most High and of the Lord Yahushua HaMashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Greeting, right? So let's go up in here, right? Now, before I go there, let's do this. I want to show you something. Because I have a question. But let me think about this for a second. Luke 24. Bear with me for a second here. Luke 24, I think it's like, boom. This is Luke 24:44. It says this, and he said unto them, these are the words which I spake unto you while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses, and in the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me. Then opened he their understanding, that they might understand the scriptures. Right? So, before the Lord Yahushua left them, he opened up their understanding of the scriptures. Right? And so, under their, let's say, discipleship, right, there were things that they didn't understand, right? Matter of fact, let's do this. Let's open up another one of these. I think it's Matthew. Matthew 13. Boom. This is Matthew 13:10. It says, and the disciples came and said unto him, why speakest thou unto them in parables? He answered and said unto them, because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but unto them it is not given. Right? So at this time, they didn't understand why he was talking like that. Right? So under their discipleship, right, there were things that they didn't understand. But before they were sent, right, or made apostles, right, with the word apostle meaning to send. Matter of fact, let's do that. Let's go open up another one of these. Apostle. Let's do that. See what that word means. Apostolos. Apostolos. Right? He that is sent, right? A delegate, messenger, one sent forth with orders, right? Specifically applied to the 12 apostles of Hamashiach, and a broader sense applied to other eminent Christian teachers of Barnabas, of Timothy, and Silvanus. Excuse me. So the word just means to be sent, right? Apo meaning to send, I believe. Let's go in here. Apostello, right? Send away, to order, to go to a place appointed, right? To send away, right? So before they were sent away, right? Or let's go back a little bit and say this. Under their discipleship, right? There were things that they didn't understand, right? Which is why the Lord had to correct them. Like when you go to Matthew 15 and 24, where it says, "I'm not sent but unto them," right? As they were trying to turn people away and get rid of people, right? He was telling them things that they didn't quite understand. But before he sent them out, right? He opened up their understanding that they might understand the scriptures, right? So James, being one of those, right, who understood the scripture. Forgive me, I gotta, I'm trying to clear my throat out, drinking this water. So James, being one of them, right, you would think understood the scriptures, right? Says James, a servant of the Most High in the Lord Yahushua Mashiach, right? To the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting, right? So with his understanding being opened and understanding the scriptures, right, from beginning to end, or let's say in their time being that it was the Old Testament, right? You would think that he would understand that if this was indeed for all nations, he would be writing to more than just the 12 tribes that were scattered abroad. Why not just say to the whole world, right? Why not just say to everyone who believes? Why be so specific in saying to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad? The reason why he is this specific is because they understood, right, that the children of Israel were sent to different places, right, throughout history. They were dispersed in different nations and different areas, right? And that now, through the blood of the Lord Yahushua, they can now be again, let's say, reconciled to the Heavenly Father, right? So let's go in here and go to scattered, right? A scattering, dispersion. Actually, let me do this. Diaspora or diaspora. Diaspora or diaspora, right? Some people say diaspora, some people say diaspora. It means a scattering, dispersion of Israelites dispersed among foreign nations, of the Christians scattered abroad among the Gentiles, right? Right? So he's talking to the dispersed, right? Those who were scattered, right? Let's go to another place and show in what kind of places they were scattered. And then we'll get into Acts, the 2nd chapter. Let's go to Isaiah 11:11. The restored remnant. Isaiah 11:11 says, "And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people," right? What was the first time, right? The first time was when we were delivered out of Egypt, right? It says, which shall be left from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea, right? So we are scattered all over the world, all over the four corners of the earth, right? Uh, let me see. I don't know what that says exactly. I'll reserve that for another time. So when you go to Acts the second chapter, right, it starts to get into some of these lands that our people were scattered into. Okay. So let's start at the first verse here. So it says, and when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place, right? So we know that here's the first verse, right? And in this first verse, they're already giving, as I've been saying lately, cues to who was being spoken about in this chapter, right? Pentecost is one of the 3 days that we were, or let's say 3 times that we were commanded as Israelites to return to Jerusalem, to honor these days, right? To worship the Father, right? The first of those being Passover, right? Or the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The second of those being this one, Pentecost, or what is known as the Feast of Weeks, right? Penta meaning 50, I believe. This being 7 weeks or 49 days, and then the 50th day being Pentecost, right? And then the last one, I think, is Feast of Tabernacles. I wrote it down a little while ago. Yep, Feast of Tabernacles, right? And so here you have it. Like already, we're figuring out. Okay, this is a time where this is one of the days that we were commanded to go back to Jerusalem, right? So now we know where, or let's say what time we're in, right? It says, and when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place, right? And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, right? So let me see if I can get an image of that. I never, I've watched like movies on this, and then they'll show you like a little, it's like looks like a little flame, in the shape of a cloven tongue, right? Something like that, or something like this that appeared in front of all of them, right? But you imagine it'd be like a tongue. It looked like a flame, but in the shape of a tongue. You don't have nothing in here really. All right, so let's go back over here. Um, and there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as a fire, and it sat upon each of them, right? So let's look up this word tongue, right? I thought this was interesting. I didn't look this up. Let me look this up. It says cloven, divide, part, right? To cleave asunder, cut in pieces, right? To be divided into opposing parts, to be at variance and dissension, to distribute. That's interesting. To distribute, right? So let's go to the next word, uh, tongues, which I did look up. You see this word glossa or glossa. I think it's glossa, right? And this means the tongue, a member of the body, an organ of speech, a tongue, the language or dialect used by a particular people distinct from that of other nations, right? So I looked up this word, right? Because glossa sounds a lot like glossary, right? So if you know of a glossary, a lot of times there's a glossary in books that you read, right? And so if there are words that are no longer used anymore, but to say the author decided to use those words for context, they'll put like a footnote where the word is, and then either it'll lead you to the bottom of the page to tell you. Matter of fact, it does it in the scripture sometimes. Some Bibles that you buy. Matter of fact, case in point, if you go to Hosea, if you go to Hosea, the 2nd chapter, and what verse is it? Give me 1 second. It is Hosea. Yep. Wait. There, boom. Hosea 2:16. It says, "And it shall be at that day, saith the Lord, that thou shalt call me Ishi, and shalt call me no more Bali." Right. So next to this word Ishi or Ashia, right, is a R, and so you use that R, and you go down here to the bottom here, and when you get to R, where is it? Bear with me for a second. Boom. It says, example given, my husband, right? So basically, when it says this, he's saying that you shall call me your husband. You shall be my wife, and you shall call me your husband, right? So a lot of books have things like that, where they'll put a footnote next to the word, and then at the back of the book or at the bottom of the page, there's a glossary, right? Just to tell you what that word means, right? So it says an alphabetical list of terms or words found in or relating to a specific subject, text, or dialect with explanations of a brief dictionary, right? So I went to the etymology, and the word glossary sends you to this word gloss, right? And I want to show this, right? So it says word inserted as an explanation, translation, right? So when they were given these cloven tongues, or the power to speak in other tongues, what were they doing? They were translating the words into languages that the Israelite foreigners could understand, right? So read a little bit more. Translation or definition. Gloss, modern form from 1540s earlier. Also gloss from late Latin glossa or glossa, absolute or foreign word, right? Foreign word, right? Why is that important, right? Because to the Israelite foreigners, right, those words that they spoke in, like in the Galilean tongue, right, as they say in that chapter, would be foreign to them, right? So they needed to use the glossa or the gloss or the tongue, right, so that those things can be translated to them, right? It says one that requires explanation, right? That reminds you of what's that? I think it's First Corinthians. I want to say 1 Corinthians 14. Let's see. Yep. This is 1 Corinthians 14:2. It says, "For he that speaketh in an unknown tongue speaketh not unto men, but unto the Most High. For no man understandeth him, howbeit in the Spirit he speaketh mysteries. But he that prophesieth speaketh unto men to edification and exhortation and comfort. He that speaketh in an unknown tongue edifieth himself, but he that prophesieth edifieth the church. I would that ye spake with tongues, but rather that ye prophesied. For greater is he that prophesieth than he that speaketh with tongues, except he interpret, that the church may receive edifying," right? So that's what that reminded me of, right? It says later extended to the explanation itself from Greek glossa, glotta, language or a language, a tongue, word of mouth, hearsay. Also obscure or foreign word, language. Also mouthpiece, right? Literally the tongue, right? Thorn point, that which is projected, right? Right. So that's pretty much it right there from there. So I thought that was interesting that the word tongue, right, is the word glossa, because it has, those things had to be interpreted to them, right? It had to be changed so that they can understand it, the Israelite foreigners, right? So let's keep going. It says, and there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. It says this, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And there were dwelling, right, at Jerusalem, Jews, right? We know this is one of our go-to scriptures. Devout men, here's the important part, out of every nation under heaven, right? So these Jews were in every nation, right? It's very, very clear there, right? But one of my favorite things to go to further explain that Jews can be in every nation, right? Because it's funny. It's funny. I'm saying what I'm about to say because I thought this in the past as a child, that if you were if you were Jewish, you were in Israel. If you were African, you were in Africa. If you were English, or you were from England, and so forth and so on, right? That you could only, if you were that thing, you could only be from that place. And the only exception to that were so-called black people, because they were taken as slaves here in America, right? And so I think that that's the mindset for most people when it comes to this topic, because they think that if you're a Jew, that you only came from Jerusalem in these times. But no, that's not the case. This is why James called them the scattered, or the diaspora, because they were sent or dwelt in other lands, right? And one of my favorite things to go to is Esther, right? Because it drives home that point, right? That our people were everywhere, and not just at one point in time in history, and throughout the centuries, we've always been in these other lands and in these other places. I can't remember where I read this, but in the case of the Iberian Peninsula, or what is known today as Spain, right? It was known as Second Jerusalem, because there was such a heavy settlement of Israelite people in that Iberian Peninsula. Um, I wish I had a lot of books that I lost, but and again, I can't remember where I read that, but again, Spain, or the Iberian Peninsula, was known as, Second Jerusalem. So we've always been scattered or in other lands, right? And Jake, they travel and they see a land that they like and they set up shop, or they might. Matter of fact, I remember this movie, Red Tails, where there's a guy in the movie. He was flying this plane one day and rolled over the house of a pretty young lady and found out where she lived, and got with her. So that's that's what Jake liked. They might go to a land, they might see it to be a beautiful land, and they settle there, or they might see a young lady there that they fall in love with and they settle there, right? If you go into the history of how we got into some of these lands and provinces that it's going to mention in Acts the second chapter, sometimes it was because we were in the military, we were being sent certain places. Like, for instance, when you go to I believe it's First Kings, the sixth chapter, it'll tell you how Solomon sent um, levies of men to Lebanon. Now, Lebanon is just north of Israel, right? But they sent them there to help do the work of getting all of those materials to Jerusalem to build the temple and to build Solomon's palace, right? So it could be for work, it could be for the military, it could be for, you just moving somewhere for a different look because you like the way a place looked, or you went there, you visited there, you saw, you liked it, you set up shop there. Our people were dispersed for all different kinds of reasons, mainly because of captivities that happened, right? But all different kinds of reasons, just like now. Like, I'm originally from upstate New York, but my mom moved here to Massachusetts to be closer to her brother. Her brother got here to Massachusetts because he was stationed here when he was in the service. right? So that was my path, my journey, of course, through the spirit of Yahweh Shem Yahushai, I got here, right? But um, we all have different paths and reasons why we get dispersed, and in ancient times it was no different, right? So Esther again is one of my favorite things to go to explain that, right? So Esther 1:1 says this: Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this is Ahasuerus which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 107 and 20 provinces. Now I've done this show recently, but let's do this. Um, uh, I just did this a little while ago. What did I type in? I think it was Shushan, and it pulled up the map that I liked. This one. So with Susha or Shusha or where let's go back to that real quick. I should say India, even unto Ethiopia, right? So when you go to that map, Susha being like damn, what was it? I just read it earlier. Um, in any case, it was the capital of this area, and so you have Ahasuerus here who ruled from India, right, all the way to Ethiopia, which is down here somewhere, right? So in all of these lands, right, 127 provinces he ruled. Why is that important, right? Because as the story ensues, right, you got this guy. I'll jump back down to 12, but you got this guy Haman. His plot against the Jews because of an interaction that he had with Mordecai. He wanted all the Jews of Ahasuerus' kingdom or all his provinces to be killed, right? And what did they have to do in order to make that command? I mean, I'm going to show you right now. This is Esther 3:12. It says, Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants and to the governors that were over every province, right? So all of these 127 provinces received these commands from Haman, right? What was the command? Matter of fact, let's jump up a little bit. Verse 8. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed. Oh boy. Let's see. Let's look up this word. It's Hebrew, right? To separate, divide, to divide, to divide, separate, to be divided, be separated, and so forth and so on. To make a division, make a separation, right? So separated into all of these different lands, right? Here's that word: scattered abroad, dispersed, stretched, divided, severed, scattered, right? So let's go back. It says, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries, right? And so let's keep going. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, The silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. Oh, brother. Right? After their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written and sealed with the king's ring. Right? And these letters were sent by posts into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace, and the king of Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. It's like, why the fuck we gotta I ain't got no problem with the Jews. Why I gotta kill them? Right? They good people to us. They help our lands flourish. Right? But that's the point, right? So that in every province, all 127 provinces, right? All these lands had to not only be written, but written in their language, right? So it would be understood then that the people of Israel that were in these lands would also be speaking those languages, especially if they had been there for decades upon decades upon decades, even centuries, right? So let's go back. Acts 2, and let's read 5 again. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. So that's where you get that. That's where you get that. And so this is important because this young lady kept saying, but is that the Old Testament? And we were reading out of the New Testament, but she kept asking that because that would have been her way out, right? To say, oh, well, that's the Old Testament. We don't have to think about that anymore. Right? But it's important to read those things out of the Old Testament because it gives you context to the things that are being said in the New Testament, right? You wouldn't know that Israelites, let's say, were in every nation under heaven unless you go to things like Esther, unless you go to things like Ezra, right? When we were returning back from Babylonian captivity, right? Unless you go to those things, you won't understand what's being said here, the context of what's being said here. Right. So it says, now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. Right. How the hell are they doing that? Right. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not these which speak Galileans? Right. And how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? Right. So I didn't look up all of these. I've done it before. You can go back. I forget the name of the show, but you can go back. It's like one of those 1 hour shows. You can go back, and I think I went through a little bit more of them, but this time I only did Parthians and Cappadocia. So let me see what I got here. Right. I thought there was another piece. Right. So this is Jews under Parthian dynasty. Right. It says, after the invasion of Iran by Alexander the Macedonian warlord and collapse of the Achaemenid Empire, the later dynasties, i.e. Seleucids and Parthians, followed the same policies. Iranian, Armenians, Babylonian, Greek, Christian, and Jewish temples were present in all major cities. The Jewish chronicles mention the Iranian history of the Parthian period as one of the best in their history. Centers of Jewish life in the Parthian Empire were situated in Mesopotamia, right, which is that same area, right? This is Mesopotamia down in this area here, right? Where was I? It says, where was I? Mesopotamia and Nizibis and Nahardia. Jewish chronicles state that they enjoyed a long period of peace and maintained close and positive contacts with the reigning dynasty, right? So you can read some more of this. It gets into a bunch of other things right down in here, right? But that's the point, right? There was a so-called Jewish presence or an Israelite presence of our people in those lands, right? Check this out. Religious persecution of Jewish rebels in Palestine by the Romans in 135 CE also brought many Jewish refugees into the Iran, right, under the Parthian dynasty patronage. Philo and Flavius Josephus, the famed Roman historians, have documented the relations between Jews and Iranians. On the whole, religious conformity was not demanded as a mean to safeguard the reign. The ruling principle was always the advancement of reliable groups and communities and the punishment of disloyal ones, right? So this gives you a little bit more context too, because he said, look, their advancement, right? There was more reliable on groups and communities, right? That were well, let me say it this way. The ruling principle was always the advancement of reliable groups and communities. So in other words, if you were reliable and you were a benefit to those places, they was like, all right, we ain't got no problem with y'all. Y'all live, keep y'all laws, do whatever you want. And so when those, you got to understand, this is later on. Obviously, it says 135 CE, but you can understand why they would be perplexed, because it was like, man, these people ain't doing nothing to us. Why we gotta all of a sudden just start killing them, right? Because they were being prosperous, they were being a benefit to the lands that, or let me say, we were being benefit to the lands that we were in, right? So I looked up this one too. You can read this. You can go into this. I'll read a little bit here though. There was one thing that I wanted to read in here. I should have highlighted it. Boom, right here. This is from Encyclopedia Iranica. It says this: by the time the Parthians reached Babylonia, Jews had lived there under Babylonian, I can't say this, Achaemenid and Seleucid rule for more than 4.5 centuries. Every territory in the plain of the Tigris and Euphrates from Armenia to the Persian Gulf, as well as northeastward to the Caspian Sea and eastward to Media, contained Jewish populations. Now think of this: Media, Persia, right? Some of those other things that are being mentioned here, or those other places. Media, right? Elamites, Mesopotamia, that was that whole area over there, right? Where was I? Right? It says, let's go back to the top of that sentence. Every territory in the plain of the Tigris and Euphrates, from Armenia to the Persian Gulf, as well as northeastward to the Caspian Sea and eastward to Media, contained Jewish populations. And in some of these places, particularly Babylonia and Adiabene, these settlements were populous and strong. Oh, man. So it's not a foreign idea for our people to be in these other lands, right? This is a point repeatedly made by Josephus and Philo in their dealings with Rome, partly, of course, for political reasons. The fact that neither Pliny nor Strabo mention the existence of Jewish communities in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley indicates that, from the perspective of the ethnography of the region as a whole, the Jews were not a dominant group. They were certainly not a majority in any one place, including Babylonia itself, although doubtless some towns and villages such as Nahardia, Huzal, and Nahar Pikad were mainly Jewish. The Jews were probably fewer in numbers than Iranians, most certainly fewer than Greeks and Babylonians, and possibly also than the smaller Semitic ethnic groups viewed as a whole. But they were settled over a far greater geographical area than any other group, right? So I also looked up Cappadocia, right? So but I just googled Jews in Cappadocia, and this came up. I'll just read this part right here. It says this: Cappadocia was considered one of the great Jewish settlements, like Babylonia and Alexandria, right, which is in Egypt. Matter of fact, I think it says Egypt in here. Egypt, right? It says the conditions of life of the Jews in Cappadocia were familiar to the sages, as is evidenced, for example, by their permitting the Cappadocian Jews to use naphtha for their Sabbath lights, since no other oil was available to them, right? So there was a presence in Cappadocia, and you can do this all day. You can go, just pick one of these and say Jews in Parthia, or Jews in Media, or Jews in Elam, or Jews in Mesopotamia, or in Cappadocia, or in Egypt and Persia, and it'll give you these same type of encyclopedia sites. This one is I think it's Britannica. Oh no, Jewish Virtual Library, right? And so you can go to, and they'll give you these little excerpts and and articles of all of those different places that are mentioned, right? Cretes, Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of the Most High. And they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying one to another, what meaneth this? Right? Others mocking said, these men are full of new wine, right? So that's pretty much it. Again, you could do that all day, right? You can pick one of these and say Jews in said place, and it'll bring up all of those different articles that you can find, and it'll tell you about the presence of Israelites in those different places, man. So when it comes to the topic of Israelite foreigners, right? It's very easy to understand. You gotta comb through it in that way. All right. So with that, hopefully that was edifying. I want to give all praises to Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai Bashem, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Honor and salutations to the elect. And with that, I say shalom.